there's a lot to talk about with this bridge, and I think there's two different conversations going on right now. One, there's the closure of this waterway for roughly a 20-day window to all marine traffic. So let's start with that. Number one, the impact to the community is not something that the United States Coast Guard really sought comment on. They didn't even alert the city of Port St. Lucie, who if you're going off any of their boat launches, comes through the North Fork of the river here in order to get out here to the Atlantic. They didn't alert that city that this was even taking place. They didn't alert a number of law enforcement entities that their marine units wouldn't be able to get through. They didn't tell people that are out there moving barges and building docks for other people that they'd have to bring their construction to a halt because they wouldn't be able to come through, or they wouldn't be able to get from one side to another in order to fuel up, or the neighborhoods that have docks and clubs and people that want to go out fishing, or commercial fishermen, that they wouldn't be able to get through that for that 20-day window. That's one problem, and the reason that's such a major problem is because it is a winners and losers issue. And the Coast Guard chose to go out there and make Brightline and FEC a winner by allowing them to close off this waterway in its entirety without saying, listen, maybe it costs you a little bit more to take all the pieces and work on those pieces off-site in other places, but we're going to allow you to do it all in place because it's more convenient to your business, even though it's to the detriment of every other business, every other community, every other resident in this whole area. It's to their detriment, but we're going to pick them as the winner and let them just close off the water. That's one major issue. What was mentioned here just now in comment was what's going on with the schedule of this drawbridge and what we see as forthcoming or as imminent by the U.S. Coast Guard. So it's not just that there's 32 trains coming by here a day, what they would call high-speed trains. It's also on top of those 32 high-speed trains, the 15 to 18 freight trains a day that go on top of this. And on top of that, there are maintenance routes every day, people driving an F-150 over the tracks, something like that, where they still have to put the bridge down for that as well. So you're talking about upwards of 50 train routes through this, largely in the 15-hour window of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And if you understand that this bridge takes no less than 18 minutes to go from the open position where marine travel can go to the closed position and back open, no less than 18 minutes, you're talking about that bridge being closed somewhere between 13, 14 hours out of a 15-hour window. And that's just a middle finger to this entire community. I want to give a few other quick points outlining how this has taken place. So we spoke to the Coast Guard about them closing off the waterway for 20 days. They chose not to do any economic impact assessments to all the communities around here. They ignored that. They didn't care what the economic impact was going to be on everybody, and that was their position. They weren't going to look at it. As it relates to the upcoming schedule for when they will be able to close the bridge and when they will have to keep it open. You had an environmental impact statement that had to occur in order to get any of this permitted, the new train routes. In that environmental impact statement, the Brightline and the FEC agreed that there would be a train schedule that everybody could count on. Since then, they have been fighting to say, no, we don't want any train schedule at all. We just want to be able to close it whenever we're coming through, and then it's open whenever we allow it to be open. So they're turning their back on that environmental impact statement. You go beyond that, and you say, when you look at this waterway, and originally in 2017 we did a study with the U.S. Coast Guard, probably all of these folks participated in, along with other people in the community, known as a waterway access management study. Very significant study to the amount of boat traffic coming through here and how it's affected. The Coast Guard said they don't like what that came up with, which was basically that the community should get 50% of the time access and the train should get 50% of the time access. Coast Guard didn't like that because the train said they can't operate with 50% of the time. They're asking for more like 45 minutes out of every hour, and sometimes even more than that. So the Coast Guard said, we're going to throw that study in the trash, and decided they're going to do another study. That's what they said they were going to do, was another study. Since then, they've changed their mind and they said they're not going to do another study. They're just going to take the information from Brightline and FEC about what they see in terms of maritime traffic and not do their own study. That's another middle finger to the community and every mariner in and around this area that they're not going to take the time to do that. Some of the other things that you can look at, last summer there was hundreds of mariners that came out here when Miami Sector Coast Guard Admiral was coming out to take a look at the waterway. Before that was taking place, that Admiral of the U.S. Coast Guard said to individual mariners and said to my office and myself personally that if people come out there on their boats when he's out there, that they are going to be fined, they are going to be essentially what we'd call pulled over by law enforcement over there. They're not going to be allowed to exercise their First Amendment right to petitioning the government based upon grievances that they have about what's going on with this. That was the United States Coast Guard tasked with supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States, like any other entity in our military, willfully taking away the First Amendment rights of people in our community. That's another major problem associated with this. The list goes on and on of where the Coast Guard has been acquiescing to Brightline and FEC, not worrying at all about what they're doing to destroy this community. And this suit has so many legs beyond what we can even speak about. I hope that whatever judge is taking a look at this chooses to ask me about what I've witnessed both in front of the public with the Coast Guard and behind closed doors with the United States Coast Guard. The conversations that I've had with them, of them changing their mind, saying idiotic things. One of the biggest things, I'll make this my last point because there's so much that could be said. One of the biggest things that brought hundreds of mariners out here last summer was when I told them what the United States Coast Guard said about our waterway and the three bridges that are right next to us. The Roosevelt Bridge overhead, the Florida East Coast Drawbridge, and the Dixie Highway Drawbridge. All within a couple hundred feet of each other in a waterway that has significant currents. The United States Coast Guard in Washington, D.C., individuals that probably have never laid eyes on our waterway, came into my office and said, well, we assessed that if we gave you a 15-minute window of time of that waterway being open, that you could get about 75 boats through in a 15-minute window of time. And every single person that I said that to in our community immediately responded with swear words because they knew exactly how ridiculous a statement like that was. But that's the kind of naive thinking that they're using to write schedules for this waterway or to close off this waterway in its entirety. That can't stand. Again, just absolute abomination. Middle finger to the community, a community that has zero benefit whatsoever by the Brightline coming through here, because the closest they pick up people to the south is probably 30-35 miles to the south, and the next place that they're dropping them off is probably 50 miles to the north. So they're literally just a pass-through community. We're just a pass-through community to them. That's an inconvenience to them, and that's how they're treating the community. So in that, I'm happy to answer questions when everybody's done, but that's a short list of the very gross problems that have taken place here.
Ryan, thank you so much.
So.